Thank you so much to Squarespace for being today's sponsor and for helping me build my new website, but more on that later. Perhaps I'll do orange this time. Except, I don't know, I feel like they would think it's weird. I really shouldn't even go out tonight. I should be working on my book that I will never publish because I'm too afraid of what others might think. Imagine if I just didn't care. If I could just be who I wanted to be and not worry so much. Just imagine. And that's a wrap. Is that good? Actually, don't even answer that because I really don't care what you think anyway. There are many reasons for why we care about what others think of us. We fear to not belong, to not be liked, to be excluded, laughed at, made fun of, neglected. Some of those fears stem from our childhood, and some we're not quite sure where they stem from. But by and large, we care about those things because we're human. Can you imagine a world where no one cared what anyone else thought ever? I wouldn't want to live in that world. We need to care. We should care. Because it matters. It matters what our loved ones think of us, at least if we want to keep them in our life, because that'll affect our relationships. It matters what our boss and colleagues think of us, because it might affect our career and work opportunities. But most importantly, it matters what we think of ourselves, because that's what will affect us in every aspect of our life. Wanting to be thought of positively isn't a bad thing in itself, but how do you know that you care just enough to where it's healthy for you in the way that it drives you forward, as opposed to it being destructive as in holding you back? And so I've been thinking about this quite a bit lately, and while keeping in mind that everyone's circumstance is different and that I definitely don't have all of this figured out, I keep coming back to these two things: self-awareness and our values. But before getting ahead of ourselves, let's define what we mean by not caring what others think. Starting with what I don't mean. I don't mean blasting music on the subway because who cares? I don't mean wearing green to a wedding that has a blue dress code because who cares? I don't mean smoking in no smoke zones because who cares? And no, I don't think that that is what most people mean when they talk about not caring, but I did really want to make that clear. So, what do I mean then? Basically this: not caring to the extent where what others think or what you fear they might think prevents you from being who you are or who you want to be and to do what you want to do. So that is what I will be referring to when saying not caring. So let's start with asking the obvious. Should we even try to stop caring what other people think? I do think it's a complicated question, but I don't think that the attitude should be to stop caring, but rather I think that the not caring part is merely a consequence of all the other stuff that we will be getting into. But in any case, I do think it's important to ask yourself what is reasonable to care about and what isn't. And how do we decide that? That's where it gets complicated. Firstly, it depends on what we are talking about. So, are we talking about not caring about what specific people think, like the people at school or at work or in your family? Or are we talking about not caring what people in general, strangers and friends and everyone in between, thinks? Now, regardless of what we're talking about, we need to make peace with the fact that no person in the history of humanity has ever been liked and approved by everyone. And nothing you ever do or say, or don't do or say, will make you, or me, an exception. As for figuring out what is reasonable to care about and what isn't, I think some helpful questions to ask yourself are: what is the nature of the relationship? What is the intention of the person? And what authority do they have? And by authority, I mean, for instance, do they share my view of life? Do we have similar values? Do they have experience in this area? Do I admire or look up to them somehow? So for example, It's probably not reasonable for me to care if someone who has zero interest in fashion and style tells me that my dress is ugly. It is probably reasonable for me to care if a loved one says that I'm having an attitude. It's probably not reasonable for me to care if a loved one who doesn't believe in exploring the world and in taking risks, while I do, tells me that I should not move abroad. And now, how about the opinion of someone who is very knowledgeable in fashion, but whose intentions are not sincere? You can see why it can be a bit complicated. And here is where I would like to talk about self-awareness and values. And let's start with self-awareness. In my experience, the more uncomfortable or insecure or oblivious we are about who we are, what we want, and what we stand for, the more likely we are to care about and be negatively influenced by what other people think and say. And then I think the opposite of that is true. The more comfortable and secure and aware we are about those things, the less likely we are to care about and be negatively influenced by what others think and say. And this brings me to my second point, which is knowing what your values are. Take your time to understand and define your values. Seriously, do it. Spend the weekend writing about it. I see a person's values kind of like their resume. It's like this quick overview of what they're all about. And now, of course, just like your resume, there is usually a lot more to a person, but it does give an idea. And now, what does values have to do with not caring what others think? Well, because your values reflect what you think is important. And when you know what you think is important, you will be better equipped for filtering out all the noise, all the clouds that are trying to cover up that beautiful, clear blue sky of yours. And here is an example. When I was younger, I would say that 90% or more of the people that I was around, both friends and acquaintances, were smokers, cigarettes. And I decided very early on that I did not want to. And now, not smoking isn't exactly a value in itself, but it stemmed from other values, such as not getting into unhealthy habits early on. And of course, I was judged for it many times, for being boring, for being a prude. And when you're really young, standing your ground isn't always the easiest thing. But even when I would feel left out, I would always circulate back to my values, and it didn't matter what anyone else thought. So how do you define your values? It's definitely not like a math problem where there is one right formula or solution, or where you can just copy your classmates' homework. Some people base their values on religion or their culture or family, but we do have our own personal values as well. And over time, some of them change as we evolve and as we grow up, and as our perspective changes and as we get more experience. But basically, your values are whatever is truly important to you. Quite literally, it is what you value. I do have two final pieces of advice, but first, let's take a small break and thank our sponsor today, which is Squarespace. Now, if you are a blogger or an artist or an entrepreneur, or if you just want to have a portfolio or a landing page for your brand, having a website can be really beneficial. And with Squarespace, it is really easy. You just pick one of their beautiful and professional templates and start building a site that is going to suit your needs. And if you do need any help on the way, their customer service really is excellent, which just makes it that much easier. I've had my website with Squarespace for almost a year now, and I'm really happy with it. So on my site, which I've kept pretty minimalistic, you can find my book recommendations. You can also find all of my camera equipment. That's everything that I use to film these videos. I have connected my social media accounts and so on. And what is also really great is that you get really close insights to the traffic on the site so that you know how many people are visiting, where they are coming from, and so on. To try it out for yourself, head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you are ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/LanaBlakely to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. And I will, of course, leave the link for that in the description box as well. And now I do want to share a bit of a perspective on something that I journaled about recently. So I wrote something like, if someone is mean to me in person or online, let's take online as an example. So let's say someone writes me a mean comment. At first, I might feel upset, but then I will think, hold on, this is a person who goes on the internet and deliberately tries to hurt people and put them down. So it's almost affirming that a person like that doesn't like me because I don't even want the approval of someone of that character. And I'm sure that you can think of someone in your life, a friend or a family member or someone who just puts other people down or who is a bully or a downer. And also, just one more thing, something that I've noticed is that the less I care and judge others, the less I worry about others caring and judging me. And the more I focus that energy on myself, on trying to be as good of a person as I can be and to have pure intentions with everything that I do, the more unbothered I am. And maybe that'll be helpful for you too. And now thank you all so much for watching. And as always, I will see you in the comment section.